Hey, what's up, Raider Nation? Chantel Chand here. And obviously, the biggest news that's been going on and trending for the Raiders has been Maxx Crosby. We're going to get into all those details today.
What up, what up, what up? Q Myers here, live from the Moscone Center, Radio Row, and there's been a lot of conversations Raiders-related. Maxx Crosby, Linc Q, and, of course, Fernando Mendoza. We'll get into all that on the Raider Squad Show. Let's get it.
Raider Nation, it's time. This is the Raiders Squad. Everything Las Vegas Raiders every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the Death Star in the desert. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Commitment to excellence starts here. The Raiders Squad Show starts now.
Hey, what's up, Raider Nation? Remember, if you like the content and you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. You can also follow us on our social media channels. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's on the screen, or you can also look at the description below. If you're listening to this on the audio side, that's also where you can find us. So if you got a couple of minutes, leave a 5-star, give us a rate and review. But at the same time, we just want to say thanks so much for rocking out with us as well. We do appreciate you continue to help the show grow. And obviously, we love your comments as well. This is an interactive show. So in that final segment, Q and I will be taking some of your questions and comments as well. Coming up on the show, we are going to focus on the O-line in that third segment. We're going to talk about defensive pieces that will be needed for the Raiders, and we'll look into free agency for that. But obviously, we are also going to talk about Maxx Crosby. Before we get into all of that, though, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Now, obviously, Q, you've been at Radio Row all week, Super Bowl week. We're just a few days away. What's it been like at Radio Row?
It's been busy. It's been fun. It's a family reunion, really, and it's kind of like just everyone getting back with each other and then meeting new friends, and it's really cool. And we just had Darnay Holmes, who obviously played nickel for the Raiders last year. He just literally left the table that I'm at about 5 minutes ago. Kirk Cousins just sat down right now. We're just getting him situated on Raider Nation Radio 920. So it's just hectic, and it's fast paced, and it's a lot of fun. And the week has already gone by. Like, to know that it's already Friday and it's all wrapped up, and knowing I've been here in San Francisco for over a week now has been it's been a lot of fun, and it's going back home for me has been great. So this has been really a blessing. It's been nice outside too. I've walked every single day, so I haven't had to even get in my car and drive around. I've just been walking from my Airbnb to the Moscone Center. So yeah, this has been great this week.
No, that's awesome. And also, I feel like the Raiders have kind of been the talk of the town. You're in the Bay. And so this is kind of the most important thing, I think, because usually during this time of year, people are like, I don't know about the Raiders, and, they're not doing too well. But right now you're thinking, well, the Maxx Crosby stuff came out, which obviously we're going to get into. But you have the number 1 overall pick. The Raiders are set to hire Linc Q. What's the buzz around the Raiders?
Yeah, it is. It's a positive buzz, because a lot of folks have a lot of confidence in Linc Q based off what he's been able to do at every stop. Really, it's not just what he's done at Seattle, but every stop that he's gone in, and especially the work that he's done with quarterbacks. And I just mentioned, Kirk Cousins sitting down with my radio station, Raider Nation Radio 920. Linc Q worked with him in Minnesota, right? And so, he did some really good things with him there. Derek Carr in New Orleans, and then obviously Sam Darnold in Seattle, and got him into the Super Bowl right now. So there's been a lot of positive that, and they've been pairing Chantel with, Fernando Mendoza, thinking that this is going to be a really good 1-2 punch between Kubiak and Mendoza, and they get to come in together, they get to build together. And a lot of people believe that, Mendoza is the kind of sponge, the kind of guy that wants to learn so much, and that Kubiak's going to put him in the best position to succeed. And so there's been a lot of positivity when it comes to the Raiders on Radio Row this week. A lot of people, including myself, would think it's an opportunity for them to start a new chapter. And I know that the Raiders have started plenty of new chapters. We know that, right? In the handful of years, they've started plenty of new chapters. But this one feels like they're at least embracing what it can be. It's not going to be an overnight sensation. They're not also going to go from 4 wins to 12 and 13 wins. But you have an opportunity to really build something. So that's really kind of been the overall consensus from everyone we talked to this week.
Yeah, and I know you've been, talking to a lot of people. Even when you're sitting down there, I see people walking by and you're like dapping them up. So it's a busy time there for you. But we are probably going to talk a little bit about the Super Bowl in that final segment. Remember, in that final segment, Q and I will take some of your questions and comments. Now, Q, obviously, we got to talk about Maxx Crosby. Now, if you are listening to this for the first time and you haven't heard the news, you've probably been under a rock. But Jay Glazer was on Yahoo Sports, and he had an interview, and we'll listen to that audio, and then I'll kind of follow up on what happened after that. So this is Jay Glazer talking about Maxx Crosby.
If they tell you they're playing, they're playing.
I think his time with the Raiders is done.
I do.
Okay. Before the draft?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Is there a landing spot that makes sense in your opinion?
A ton of them. I'm not going to say what it is yet because I'm going to try and help it out.
Sure. What kind of haul do you think realistically a Maxx Crosby gets in general?
He probably more than Micah. So the day it happened, no less than 20 teams called me and asked, dude, is this real? Can we get him? What's it for? I'm like, God, we're not there yet, but yes, it's real.
Do you think his time with the Raiders is done because that's a Raiders decision or because that's a Maxx Crosby decision?
They didn't want to do it. But he was just like, I'm not going through another rebuild.
All right. So the part that comes after that is that Jay Glazer kind of walked it back and was like, Maxx didn't say that. I said that. Q, what were your thoughts when you first heard this? And then also Jay Glazer kind of walking it back.
Well, first of all, it was something that came out of nowhere. It wasn't expected that he was even going to drop that information on Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports. And it's funny, I was able to do a little bit of, deep diving because Jason's a good friend. And so he actually came on my show a little bit after that to explain how it happened. He said, I had no idea that this was, coming. And all of a sudden, he starts talking about how the Raiders sat down Maxx for the last 2 games of the season. And, he starts talking about all these things that we just heard. And so he said, yeah, his time was done. And he said, it just caught me off guard. And all of a sudden he said he flipped into interview mode instead of more like just kind of conversation mode. Right. He was like, man, I was really a fan in the conversation. Then all of a sudden I became an interviewee. But, to me, it wasn't surprising that Glazer kind of walked it back a little bit, only because it doesn't make sense to have it out there right now and say it's from Max's point of view for multiple reasons. Right. I mean, Maxx may have felt that way when, he got sat down at the end of the season, week 17 and week 18. He might have felt that way when he initially called Jay. I know that they're close. I know that they're workout buddies. So I don't doubt that conversation was had. So I'm sure that there was something that was said, but also, it doesn't do Maxx any good. It doesn't do the Raiders any good for it to be out there like, oh, he wants out right now. Then his value goes down, right? I mean, it's almost like the leverage that might be out there for a team like the Raiders to be able to get more draft capital, for him, if in fact they were to move on from him. And I've said very, as a matter of fact, and with my chest 1,000 times, that if he's not with the Raiders next year, it's because he chooses not to be. I don't think the Raiders at all want to move on from him. John Spytek has talked about not letting good players out of the building, and he's a great player. So I don't think that that's the case. But if, in fact, he goes to them somehow, some way and says, hey, I would like to go play and have an opportunity to win. I don't want to really be a part of another rebuild. I think that they would agree to that and they would make it happen. But I don't think it makes any sense to have that out there and basically say, oh, Maxx is done with the Raiders, because now teams out there that may be interested, and apparently there's a lot of teams interested in him, which it would make sense. Then they think, well, we can lowball these guys because he wants out anyway. So there's many different reasons why I feel like Jay Glazer somewhat, walked that back on yesterday.
Yeah, and I honestly think what happened was because Jay Glazer is a credible source. He's been right about a lot of things. He's a guy that's been doing this for a long time. And I think what essentially happened, because him and Maxx are tight, I think Maxx may have told him something like, maybe I don't want to be a part of a rebuild. And Jay maybe just let that slip out. And then Maxx probably picked up the phone and was like, yo, that was supposed to be between us. And he kind of walked it back. That's what I think probably happened, because that would probably be the most likely thing to happen between anybody. Q, if I told you something, that would have been the same thing I would have called you and been like, hey, that was just between us. And you would take care of it. But here's the thing. I've always said, if you're a part of the Raiders, if you don't want to be there as a fan, I don't want you on the team. That's the only thing. Maxx has been loyal. He's played very hard. And I think near the end of the season, when he was told to sit out, that he was really frustrated. And there was rumors, even before then, should they trade Maxx? So here's what I want to ask you, Q. First, what is the haul you think they could get for Maxx? Do you think it could be something like a Micah Parsons?
No, see, and that's the thing. That's one of the $1 million questions that I have, because it feels like you won't get as much as, the Micah Parsons trade. But then you hear, guys like Jay Glazer say that you would. And look, it only takes one team to really want him to the point where they're willing to, overvalue him and give up more assets and more draft capital than expected. The reality of it is it wouldn't be a team that's picking in the top 10 anyway, right? Because why would they go ahead and give up draft capital, go get a guy with a big time contract that, they don't have a chance to win. So you're looking at teams like Buffalo, you're looking at teams like Chicago, you're looking at teams like Detroit. They're going to be picking in the back end of the draft, right? And so you're already looking at a late first round pick. So would you get 2 first round picks for him? Would you get a first and a third? Would you get, he's 29 years old. He's had multiple knee surgeries. So I don't really know the value. I asked Ian Rappaport when he sat down with me, and he said, I think a late one you can get for him. But then you hear Jay Glazer say, more than the Micah Parsons trade. So I honestly don't believe that. But you know what it is, it's like free agency, right? You only just need one team to fall in love with you, and if that's the case, they may overvalue you.
Yeah, you need one team to fall in love with you, and maybe a team that's a little bit desperate to kind of put them over the edge. And so, if I was SpyTech, I wouldn't want to give up Maxx for more than 2 first. Like that would have to be the minimum for Maxx, because if it's not going to go well for the Raiders, then why would they make that trade? But that's the other aspect of it, Q.
Right.
While they're going through this rebuild, which they are committing to, which I absolutely love because they've been trying to rebuild on the fly for years now. They're committing to the rebuild. And if Maxx does want out and you can get something really good for him, that could go really well for the Raiders. But the only issue is you never know in the draft if you'll ever get a Maxx Crosby again.
Right. Exactly. That's been the biggest key. I mean, remember, think about it when they traded Khalil Mack. They got all those assets in return. What did they do with them? Not much. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like they got Josh Jacobs. Really, I mean, reality is out of everything that they gave up, they got Josh Jacobs, and I don't even think that was the Khalil Mack pick. I think that was the Cowboys pick when they traded for Amari Cooper. That was the first round pick. So they really didn't get too much out of all those trades that they made and all those first round picks that they received. I mean, it's just you have to make the right decisions once you get those picks. And look, I think John Spytek will probably do a really good job in the draft as a GM. I think that he's really sharp. Obviously, this last draft, there's still TBD on who's going to pop and who's not. But I think that he's a sharp guy. But until you actually see it and put proof out there, then you really don't know. And the other thing about this is, I was trying to be stressing this, on my radio show and anyone I talk to here on Radio Row, because as you can imagine, there's been plenty of outlets that have been, hey, man, you got a couple minutes to talk about Maxx. And so I've been on a bunch of different radio shows. And I told him straight up, until we actually hear Maxx say that I don't want to be here, or, hey, I would like to trade, and this is reason. Like, he's got platforms. It's not like he's the guy that you don't ever hear from. He's got podcasts. He's got multiple podcasts. I mean, he's on. I haven't seen him here. That's the one surprising thing. I thought I'd see him on Radio Row. I know he's still rehabbing from the knee injury, the knee surgery he had, but normally he's out here. I haven't seen him. Didn't see him last night at NFL Honors, as part of the Walter Payton Man of the Year. He was the Raiders nominee, so I was surprised I didn't see him there. Maybe I just missed him. But I thought that he would be out here. So that was kind of surprising. Maybe, like I said, maybe he's just kind of rehabbing his knee and laying low. But not to hear from him, is to me, it's like, okay, until he actually comes out and says, I want to be traded, then it's kind of, I'll take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, and I'm going to bounce off that too, because I also feel like if Jay Glazer was saying things that wasn't true, I think Maxx would have also hopped online, because he also has a podcast, and been like, I never said those things, or I don't want those things. He also didn't do that part. Right. So it's like, what's really true. And in terms of what you've kind of heard around the Raider organization, because you're very close to this team, Q, did you hear anything that Maxx could possibly be traded before the trade deadline, or even coming up now in the offseason? Like, were you hearing those rumors?
I mean, I heard that, there was, some rumblings that, maybe he would want out, after this situation that happened, and maybe even been thinking about it a little bit ahead of time, because he is getting older and he wants to win. But there's never anything that's been concrete. So it's never anything that's, worth reporting on. Right. I don't like to just sit there and say, oh, hey, I'm hearing that Maxx might want out, when it's, maybe does he want, is it possible? It's nothing concrete. So that's kind of where I've been, at right now. And of course, the whole situation that happened with Pete Carroll, I did ask him about the situation and if there was, any kind of strain with the organization. He said no, but he also said that he was going to be around to coach some more, and obviously he wasn't. So, you kind of got to take that with a grain of salt. So it's kind of a hard situation to just break down and diagnose until you actually hear from the man himself. And when he has as many platforms as he does, where he can communicate whatever he needs communicated, and you haven't heard anything, it's kind of like it is what it is at this stage of the game.
Yeah, and we'll obviously keep an eye on Maxx and everything that has to do with him and if he is going to get traded or not. And I'm sure this is going to be a topic throughout the offseason or even leading up to the draft, because we could see some trades made on draft day itself. But coming up on the other side, Raider Nation, we're talking about Maxx Crosby. He's on the defense. We're going to talk about some positional needs for the Raiders on the defense. That's coming up on the other side. Keep it locked here on the Locked On Network. You're watching or listening to the Raider Squad Show. All right, well, it's time to hear from some of our sponsors. So quickly, we'll go over to FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. So if you're a new customer, bet just $5 and you can get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season's over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And also, we got to hear from another one of our sponsors, ZocDoc. Finding a doctor you actually like can feel like discovering a diamond in the rough. Sure, you want someone who's a network nearby and has availability, but you also want a doctor who listens, makes you comfortable, and explains things clearly. That kind of doctor exists, and finding them is easy with ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can find someone you love without all the hassle. We're talking about booking in-network appointments with more than 150,000 providers across 50 states, covering 200 specialties from primary care and dentistry to dermatology and eye care. And I'll admit, the thing with doctor's appointments, sometimes you want to get in with a doctor and it takes like 2 months. With this, you can find one that's more available. You don't have to wait. So stop putting off those doctor appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a doctor you love today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL, ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Thanks to ZocDoc for sponsoring this message. Welcome back, Raider Nation. Remember, if you like the content, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. In that final segment, Q and I will be taking some of your questions and comments. So if you're watching this on YouTube, please get those comments into the chat. If you're listening to this, you can always hit us up later on YouTube or even on Twitter, and you can ask us some questions and comments, and we may be able to get to it on another episode. So also, we just want to say thanks so much for rocking out with us and supporting the show. You continue to help the channel grow. And also big shout out to Ari, because he's done a great job with the YouTube page, and that continues to grow as well. And we do appreciate your support, Raider Nation. All right, well, we were talking about the defense, Q, and obviously there's a lot of holes on this Raiders team. And specifically, if we focus in on the defense and we talk about free agency, what are some names that kind of pop out to you? And if you could give me 3 names of who you would be looking for in free agency on the defensive side, who would those names be?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm thinking about guys on the defensive side of the ball, man. Look, it's hard, because the thing is, I know that they have a lot of salary cap space, but I think that that's going to be a lot of it's going to be dedicated to the offensive line.
Yeah.
So I really think that most of the additions defensively are going to be by way of the draft. You know, I mean, they very easily could get 3 more linebackers. I can see them going and getting another corner. Eric Stokes is a corner that I think that they should re-sign. Right? I thought he did a really good job with the team last year, so I could see him being a guy that's in the building. But as far as just guys that are out there in free agency, I don't really know on the defensive side. I feel like that it's more of just kind of draft and develop. And this is the thing. I think that that's what this team wants to do, right? If you go and look at what Tampa Bay did after the Tom Brady run was over, and the way that they flipped that roster and how young it was, and they had so many young guys out there starting. I mean, outside of Baker Mayfield, everybody was like a 1 or 2 year guy. I think that that's ultimately the goal that they really want to achieve with this team. And like I said, I think that you're going to get at least 2, I think, offensive linemen in free agency, where it could end up being 3. And if you get 3, I think that you're using and allocating a lot of your salary cap space there. And of course, Rashid Shaheed is my guy as well, that I think that they should bring in. But that's all offense. I don't really know too many names that are out there available defensively that would make sense at this stage of the game, in free agency.
Yeah, and you talked about how they want to build it through the draft, right? And my question to you, Q, is when we talk about those positional needs, and you mentioned a linebacker, but what are the biggest positional needs on this defense that if you could rank it? Yeah, like what do you think the Raiders need the most?
Well, they need another edge, obviously. I mean, they've been looking for that Robin forever, right? I mean, they feel like they swung and missed multiple times, and I hate that I look at a guy like K'Lavon Chase on what he's doing with the Patriots and realizing that he was in the Raiders building and wish they had got him. I don't blame them for taking the chance on Malcolm Kuntz, but that clearly didn't pay out and work out for them. So I'm sure if they could redo it now, they'd probably pay Chase on to stick around. Maybe that's a guy. I mean, I want to say he only signed a 1-year deal with the Patriots. Maybe that's a guy that they go revisit because they need multiple edge rushers. I think they need another guy on the interior of the defensive line. I do like what Tonka Hemingway brings to the table. JJ Pegues, I think, has an opportunity to do something, but they're still young and they're still trying to find their role and figure things out in the NFL. They need someone that can collapse that pocket. I mean, they really do, and they've tried so many different directions. That's the thing about free agency as well, right? I mean, these guys, 1, are free agents for a reason. 2, are they going to be able to, really be that difference maker that they're looking for? And everyone thought that, Christian Wilkins was going to be a home run, and he played 5 games. Right. Yeah. And we all know how it all played out after that. And so you're always taking a chance when you give, especially guys, big money in free agency. When you get a guy on like a 1-year deal in free agency and they know that if they go out and ball out, then they're going to have an opportunity to hit free agency again. A lot of times that's really the best case scenario because, again, contract years, they really will push these players to, play at a higher level, make sure that they, dot their I's, cross their T's, and they have the attention to detail. But, there's definitely holes that they have on the defensive side. Like I said, the linebackers, corner, I can see them getting another safety, defensive tackle, right? I mean, really all aspects of the defense, all aspects of the defense, I think you can provide, right? And you can go out and get if you so need to do it that way, if you want to go through free agency. But again, I think a lot of it's going to be really kind of heavily leaned on when it comes to the draft.
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with you. I want to stick on the secondary, though, because you talked about them getting a corner. You talked about them getting a safety. When it comes to that secondary, Q, you mentioned Stokes. Was there anybody else that you really liked this offseason? There's a lot of one-and-done deals this year, right? Like there were a lot of one-year deals. So the team's going to look totally different next year. But was there any players in the secondary that you, other than Stokes, that you were like, you know what, we should probably keep him?
I mean, not really, right? I mean, Darian Porter, obviously, he's only going to be a second-year guy, so he'll be coming back. But I mean, when you look at when they have 24 free agents in their own building, is there anyone that stands out to you that you're like, yep, they have to come back? You know what I mean? Like, I really, and that's not me trying to be, like ugly towards them. It's just the fact that there really isn't. Like, I know Devin White had a lot of tackles, but I know that Devin White missed a lot of tackles, right? I mean, so I know that a lot of run fits that he did weren't correct. I know that when Maxx Crosby comes yelling, screaming off the field, in Philadelphia, it's because Devin White lost contain, and there was a lot of misses. So, I could see that whole linebacking room being different, right? I mean, they have Lindenberg and Eichenberg under contract, but, Rob, I could see him, going somewhere else. Jamal Adams definitely could see him going somewhere else, and Devin White as well. Right. And so none of those guys are guaranteed to come back. Like I said, Stokes is the one guy I look at on the defense that's a free agent that I thought, yeah, cool. He would be a good addition to bring back. But honestly, there's not a whole lot there.
Yeah, I think for the secondary, I think that's been one of the positional groups for the Raiders that really hasn't been on point for a few years. If I'm just going to be real, that's been a hole that the Raiders have had for a while, but I do believe that Stokes had a great season. And I'm really curious to see Darian Porter's sophomore season. When I take a look at the free agents though, and the only free agent that I really, really think other than the O-line, because I saw a lot of comments like, let's spend $100 million on the O-line. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Right.
Let's do that. Right.
Yeah.
They need a new O-line, but in terms of the defense, the one name that popped out to me was Devin Lloyd. Because when it comes
Yeah.
to linebacker,
Yeah.
this is a team that struggled. When you hear the name Devin Lloyd, would you kind of throw dollars at him? Because that would totally change the defense, I feel.
Yeah, and he's a guy that's a difference maker when it comes to creating turnovers as well. That's the one thing about this team that they don't do. And I thought that last year under Pete Carroll, they were going to have an uptick on creating turnovers. And I guess they maybe did a little bit, right? But they just don't consistently get turnovers, create turnovers. And Devin Lloyd last year had, 4 interceptions with Jacksonville in the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. I know that he gets banged up quite a bit, but, he can make plays, and he was a hell of a player coming out of college. That's a guy that could probably fit. But the other thing about this is we can't really talk about the free agents until we know who the defensive coordinator is going to be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Everything it's not like I know who the DC is, I don't know who the OC is, so I can't say that this player is a fit with what this guy wants to do because I don't know who this guy is. So until we start to see, and once they put pen to paper when it comes to the head coach, and then we start to see him put his staff together, then you can go back and say, okay, well, this is what he had in, say, Seattle. This is the guys that, that worked well for him, or wherever, if it's Jim Schwartz, if it's Jim Schwartz, just say they get him as their defensive coordinator, right? I mean, you usually look at longer, DBs, guys that like to play man-to-man, which to me, that's right up my alley. That's the kind of DBs I like to see, is the ones that are get in your face, muck it up, and, bump and run. That cat defense, I got this cat, you got that cat, and go and get after it. I think Jim Schwartz is a hell of a defensive coordinator. But again, until we actually know what the staff is going to be, I can't really sit there and pinpoint, well, this free agent would be really good on this team, because you don't know what kind of scheme they're going to run and what players fit that the best.
Yeah, and I think Jim Schwartz's name has been thrown around a lot, but also I think you and Linc both mentioned last episode, or maybe the episode prior, that he is still signed with the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that would be something that they would have to figure out. But if Jim Schwartz was available for the Raiders, would you kind of throw hard money at him to try to get him to come over?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Like I said, he's a very proven defensive coordinator, not a very good head coach. There's a reason why Cleveland passed on him twice, right? I mean, they had an opportunity to put him in the head coaching position, which is why he's angry right now. I think that he's a really good DC. I don't think he's a very good head coach. And I would have no problem with that. And talking to Ian Rappaport here on Radio Row, we, did a conversation and had a conversation. I asked him about Jim Schwartz, and he said, yeah, I mean, he could be a possibility, but he's still in a contract with the Browns, and they'd have to work something out. And then as soon as we wrapped up the interview, and as soon as he took the headset off, he's like, yeah, I can see that happening. He kind of, it's almost one of those, he didn't want to put it on wax and put it on the record, but he said that could definitely happen. So, take that for what it's worth. Not saying that, the Raiders are going to go after Jim Schwartz, just saying that, the look that Rap Sheet gave me and the way that he said that he could see that happen is basically like that there's something there. There could be something there. So just kind of watch out for that. But again, he's got to put the staff together, and the Raiders can't have arranged marriages. They have to make sure that they allow the head coach to hire his staff.
I feel like their arranged marriage never works out, especially in football.
Ever.
You know what I mean?
Ever.
Yeah, in real life and in football. But that's what the Raiders were dealing with, obviously, this past season. I'm going to throw a few more names at you, Q, that I was really interested in when I was looking at the free agents, obviously, because I've been looking at this since week 2. But also John Franklin Myers from the Broncos. Now, he's not a guy that has great lateral speed, but he's also a difference maker, and he's great when it comes to pressure. And also, being in that same division, if the Broncos don't want to pay him, I feel like the Raiders should maybe make a play for him as well. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, he's good, but again, I want to just caution to be careful with trying to, assemble a team in free agency, right? I mean, to me, that never really works. I feel like in free agency, you have to address some of your holes, right? So some guys that can help really elevate you. And the only reason I'm talking about throwing some money at the offensive line is because that offensive line is so, it's so in need of it. Right. And if you can go ahead and assemble it like they did when Reggie McKenzie assembled that offensive line, when he went and, and paid Kelechi Osemele and, brought in guys like that, that was all of a sudden a solid offensive line. That's what they need to do. And at least I feel like those guys, given whatever scheme they're going to run, and I'll say this, the Kubiaks, the Shanahans, what kind of blocking scheme do they always run? Zone. And the Raiders have traditionally not done really well when it comes to the zone blocking scheme. So when you look at that, they'll probably have to have multiple offensive linemen to actually fit that scheme, right? That outside zone. I was talking to Marshall Newhouse yesterday, former offensive lineman for the Raiders and longtime offensive lineman in the league in general. And he was talking about the zone scheme and why it works 99% of the time for most teams around the league. It doesn't work for the Raiders for some reason, but you got to get guys that buy into the scheme. You got to get guys that fit with it, more athletic offensive linemen that can move and get in space where they need to get and, block to a certain spot as opposed to blocking a man. So, he's going to have to find the guys that are ideal for what he wants to do. Like that's why I think that this new chapter, and I keep calling it that, of Raider football is going to look a lot different, right? They're going to allow the coach to say, these guys don't fit with what I do. I need to bring in so-and-so, X, Y, and Z to fit with what I want to do, right? This doesn't fit with what my DC wants to do. We need to bring in X, Y, and Z for that. Or John Spytek, we need you to go draft this corner, this linebacker, someone that fits this mold with what we want to do. Like, I just think that there's so much that they have to really build, so much work that they have to put in to try to put this team together. And it's going to take a while to get it done.
Yeah, and I definitely do agree. We can't really, like, obviously we can have these hypothetical conversations, but unless we know who the defensive coordinator is and what scheme they're going to run, then we can't really be like, hey, these are the players that the Raiders should go for. So that's all going to fall into line after things really get put together after the Super Bowl, because the Raiders can make it official with Linc Kubiak on the Monday. So that's what everyone's going to be looking forward to. So coming up on the other side, as Q was talking about the O-line, should the Raiders just spend their $100 million on the O-line? Maybe. We'll get into that on the other side. So keep it locked here on the Locked On Network. You're watching or listening to the Raider Squad Show. As the new year gets going, a lot of people are trying to simplify their routines, and dinner is a big one. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, and packed schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference. That's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door. With easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great, they're rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. And it's easy to see why. So meals come ready to fit your schedule, 30-minute recipes, and they're oven-ready trays or even quick lunches. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering my listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert. I also want to tell you about another one of our sponsors as well, and that is Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the games. It's people moving the action, so when the momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Welcome back, Raider Nation. Remember, if you like the content, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. You can also follow us on our social media channels. You'll see on the screen or even in the description if you're listening to this on the audio side. Remember, in that final segment that's coming up, Q and I will be taking some of your questions and comments. So if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to get them in the chat right now. You can always hit us up later if you're listening to this as well. And we just want to thank you so much for the support. The Locked On Raiders continues to grow. The Squad Show continues to grow. And it's all because of you, Raider Nation. So thank you for continuing to rock with the show. All right, well, let's get into the O-line, because obviously this is going to be a focus and something that Raider Nation and obviously the front office is going to be looking at. Now, the first question that I actually want to ask you about this, Q, is obviously this past season, we know how horrendous the O-line was. You could say it was the worst in the league. And I think a lot of people would say, yeah, it might have been. But here's the thing. Do you think a lot of that had to do with the fact that Kolton Miller was out a very long time and then JPJ was dealing with injuries too? How much do you think that was one of the main reasons why they were the worst O-line in the league? Or do you think that they were just terrible with what they put together?
I think they were terrible with what they put together. I mean, honestly, Brennan Carroll, obviously that didn't work out very well as far as, just him trying to coach up the offensive line. It's funny, I mentioned Marshall Newhouse and how he sat down with me yesterday. He said, Q, I went back and looked at the film, and he said, and some of the coaching concepts and the blocking concepts they were trying to run just didn't make sense. He's like, I don't know what, like, I looked at the offensive line, I watched the film and said, I don't know exactly what they were trying to achieve on this play or what they were trying to achieve on that play. So I think a lot of it, as Raider Nation, was very loud about and boisterous about throughout the course of the season, falls on Brendan Carroll and just bad coaching. So I do think that those guys are not as bad as they appeared to be, but they definitely need to be upgraded, right? I mean, look, DJ Glaze probably is a better guard than he is tackle. You could probably put him in there at that left guard position next to Kolton Miller, and all of a sudden you've got, Fernando Mendoza. If they do draft him, they have his blind side looking pretty good, right? And then you have questions from the center all the way to the right tackle. When it comes to JPJ, I don't know who he is. I've asked this to multiple guys, here on Radio Row. What do you think the Raiders want to do with him? What position does he play? And, I've had a variety of different conversations because all of Raider Nation wants him to be a center because he wants to be the center. And we all know that he played center at Oregon. But there's been 2 staffs now with the Raiders that have put him at guard, right? I mean, I think that a lot of people don't realize that. Like JPJ, when he was first drafted, played what? He played guard. And then they moved him over to center when their starting center went down. And he said, hey, I'm the Remington Award winner. I could play center. And he just kind of took it and ran with it. And I'm not saying he did a bad job with it because I think he's a really good offensive lineman. I really do. And I think he has the nasty. He has that kind of that Mauler mentality. Lincoln talks about it all the time. I just don't know. I'm not an offensive line coach. I don't know where these coaches want to put him and why they're so hesitant on just putting him in one spot. What I hope they do with him, though, is find his spot and not yo-yo with him and, he's got to earn his spot. He's got to do I think we all know that he's one of the better offensive linemen that the Raiders have in that room. So if he's not a starting offensive lineman, then what are they doing? So that's, to me, I just want them to establish who he's going to be and put him there. Don't, toy with him. Don't mess with him. Don't have him running with the 2s one week and running with the, 3s another week. Have him at the center position one week. Put him at the guard position. Just decide what you're going to do with him. Let him know what it's going to be, and this is how you're going to go moving forward. I think that they really screwed up that whole situation when they, like I said, yo-yoed back and forth throughout the course of training camp. And literally every day, me, Vinny, and others are sitting there watching, and that's one of the first things we do when they get into, their drills is, okay, where's JPJ today? Oh, he's not even in with the 1s. Okay, he's at the 2s now. It was really weird, and somehow, some way, they had some kind of disconnect, coaches, JPJ, and others. But just don't do that this year. That they just got to establish who he is and move forward.
Yeah, and I think you make a great point. They were kind of yo-yoing him throughout the whole entire season. And I was like, what type of beef did JPJ have with staff?
Right.
Because the way that they were moving him around, and we knew coming into the season that Kolton Miller and JPJ were their 2 best offensive linemen. Right. And then both of them deal with injuries. The O-line looks worse and worse each time. So I want to ask you about a couple of these guys that were on the O-line. And the first guy I want to start off with is DJ Glaze at right tackle. Because right. I thought heading into this year that DJ Glaze looked a lot better. There was the one game the season prior that he played against the Saints and he was serving pancakes. And I was like, okay, he's getting better. But this season, I feel like he kind of regressed. What were your thoughts on DJ Glaze's performance this year? And is he a guy that we might still see on the O-line next year starting?
He he could be a swing tackle for all I know. Right. I mean, again, I think that guard is probably the better position for him. I think that if you kick him inside and if you put him next to Kolton Miller, I think that would be a lot better than where he is out there as a right tackle. And the reason I don't like him there at a right tackle position is because he gets beat by speed on the inside. And that's why Lincoln and others so many times said throughout the course of the year last year, get out of the pistol, get out of the shotgun, right? Because then that's when all of a sudden the defender, they rush him up the field and then they cross his face. And when they cross his face, they have a beeline to the quarterback because he's not fast enough to react. So that was a flaw in his game. And so if he's on the interior, he can be protected a little bit more from that. And so that was one scenario that was talked about quite a bit. And so I think that he's probably either going to be a swing tackle or he's going to be pushed inside the guard. And then you have the other guys, Caleb Rodgers and Charles Grant that I think are still TBD because they're still young and they didn't get that much burn last year.
Okay, so you mentioned Caleb Rodgers and Charles Grant. So they didn't get a lot of burn, and I feel like we weren't able to really assess them on the O-line. This year, Q, how much burn would you like for them to get? And do you think there's a chance that Caleb Rodgers, because in the small little, example of what we saw from him, I thought there were some really good positives from a guy like Caleb Rodgers.
Yeah, I like what he brings to the table. I really do. I think that he has an opportunity to be really good, but again, he's got to go out there and show it. And he told us in the locker room many times that he knew that there was areas of his game that he needed to improve. There were certain things and kind of crutches that he leaned on a lot that are picked. You could identify him on film, and so that's how he got beat. So I think that he's continuing to work really hard. I like him at the right guard spot. Now, I'm not saying just go give it to him. I think that all these guys should really earn their spot. The only guy that doesn't really have to earn their spot is Kolton Miller, because you already know what he's going to bring to the table. But look, he's getting longer in the tooth as well. And he's been banged up now the last couple of years, where at one point he was really solid. So at some point, you're going to have to get your left tackle. And I know that there's a lot of excitement about Charles Grant, but I can't get excited about Charles Grant when I think the Raiders played him like 6 snaps. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing I could look at and say, man, he was fantastic. They just didn't give him enough burn for me to say, yeah, I think that he's going to be the right tackle of the future. Now, I know there's people in the building that believe that. I know there's people in the building that are singing his praises, but I don't know what that's based off of, right? And you can say it's based off practice, but at a certain point of the season, they're hardly even practicing, right? I mean, they're sure not padded, and I can't tell you a good offensive lineman unless he has pads on, right? I mean, hell, I could be a good offensive lineman if we're going to do it through walkthrough, right?
Yeah.
Tell me what to do and where to go. I can do that, but I sure can't put no pads on and think I'm going to block you anyway. Hell, I couldn't block you.
Well, and that's a problem, Q. If you could not block me, that would be a problem.
I'm not an old lineman.
Exactly. You mentioned Kolton Miller, and we know that he's dealt with so many injuries. And so that's my concern heading into this year is, what if we're dealing with another season where Kolton Miller gets injured?
Yep.
Q, how much of those injury concerns kind of worry you in terms of keeping him on? Because they've already committed to him, but at the same time, like, is there some concern there?
Yeah, for sure. Right. And again, I mean, you start to see the decline of players. You start to see guys, go down with injuries, and then it takes longer for them to bounce back. Yeah, absolutely. I think that they definitely need to start to find a succession plan at that left tackle position. Like I said, Kolton Miller is not going to be, that guy forever. Right. And so at some point they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do at that position, who can be, the next left tackle and hold it down for the next 10 years. And maybe they find that guy in the draft. Maybe they have that guy in the building, and that's just the reality of it. Just don't know exactly, what that details. And so, I think there's definitely some injury or some concern with the injury history now, Kolton Miller, as they continue to stack up.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest concern heading into the season. I remember at the beginning of the season, both you and Linc were just like, they have to stay healthy, and the O-line did not stay healthy. Now, in terms of free agency, this is where a lot of Raider Nation, and I'm sure John Spytek and Tom Brady are going to be looking at the O-line. One name that both you and Linc threw around was Linderbaum, right?
Yeah.
So that was a guy that you feel like they should throw all the money at. Do you feel like when it comes to free agency, they should also look for guys on the O-line that are under 30 years old too?
For sure. Yes,
Okay.
for sure. I like guys in the 26, 27-year-old range where I feel like they still have some really good years in them, not guys that are 32, 33, and they might have a year or 2 years in them. Like, I'm looking for 4 or 5 years that you can get really good play out of them. And the thing about it is, and I know everyone wants the Raiders to go get Tyler Linderbaum, I'm interested to see if he's even going to be available. And the reason I say this, and I know before everyone gets all, hot and bothered and be like, he's going to be available, Q. No, that broke down. Like, who's their head coach now? Jesse Minter. Jesse Minter came from where? The Chargers. What did the Chargers realize this past year? If that offensive line ain't right, you ain't right. So I don't think that he's going to go to the Baltimore Ravens and understand that one of the best centers that are going to be available in free agency, he's going to let out of the building. You know what I mean? Like, to me, it doesn't make any sense. They just saw what a depleted offensive line looks like in LA with the Chargers. I'm sure he's going to say, hey, you know what? Do what you got to do to hold on to that guy, right? Just make sure you hold on to him. You got to franchise him. Do whatever you got to do. Don't allow him out of the building. I would actually, and this is just, my gut feeling, I would actually be surprised if he gets out of Baltimore. But if he does, then definitely Raiders go and back the Brinks truck up to his front door and let him have whatever's in it.
Yeah, I think they have to be extremely aggressive in free agency. Like, if they want and Tyler Linderbaum, like they got to go and they got to give him whatever he wants. Like, here's the blank check. Like, we want you to sign. But there's a couple of other guys on the O-line that I thought were some interesting names that I'm going to throw at you. Braden Smith, who I believe is like almost 30 years old.
Yeah.
There's also Jonah Williams. Trey Pipkins, who was with the Chargers, even though like I'm not the biggest fan of his, but like, he's available and he's younger. And then Josh Jones, who is with Seattle. And then obviously there's like that Linc Kubiak connection there. Any of those names kind of pop out to you that you would be like, okay, I kind of like him and I would pair him up with a guy like Linderbaum?
A Braden Smith, I could see them, making a move for him. There's not a lot of sexy in those names that you just threw out there, right? I mean, let's just keep it real, right? And even, Linderbaum has a few, holes in his game as well, but I feel like he's the best one that's out there and available if, in fact, he is going to be available. So, I never get too super fired up about free agency, just because, again, I know that these guys are free agents for a reason. I mean, Pipkins is pretty good. I know he did a pretty good job against, Maxx when he went up against him and he was forced into action. So I thought he did a pretty good job. And, it's not like he shut down Maxx. Nobody just shuts down Maxx, but I thought he did a pretty solid job. And, he knows the division, obviously. But, again, I think you need to look at offensive linemen that are going to fit with that zone blocking scheme because there's no reason to think that they're not going to run that zone blocking scheme. That's what the Kubiaks and the Shanahans do. So really that more athletic, and this, I know I'm bouncing all over the place, but this is what Steve Weiss told me from the NFL Network yesterday. And because we had brought up Linderbaum, he's like, yeah, really good player. He's like, but is it the guy that's going to fit with what they want to do? He's like, don't worry about names, Q. Don't worry about the names. Go get guys that do what you do. With guys that do what you want to do, whatever scheme you're going to run, whatever fit you want to have. Who fits that? He's like, I don't care what the name on the back of the jersey says. I want to know, can the guy play the position? He said, what the Raiders need more than anything in the trenches, both sides of the ball, are goons and gangsters. And when he said that, I was like, wow, that's a hell of a statement, right? The goons on the offensive line and the gangsters on the defensive line, right? Yeah. They need dudes that are just grimy, gonna wear you out by the fourth quarter on the offensive line. The defensive line has their hands on their hips, right? Those are the goons. And the gangsters are the guys that are going to muck it up all game long, get after the quarterback, make running the rock difficult, make life a lot easier for Maxx Crosby. Just that's what needs to happen. Like the Raiders need to go and put together a list of goons and gangsters to go ahead and address the offensive line and defensive line. I thought that was a great description from Steve Weiss.
No, I love that. We're going to have an episode of what goons and gangsters to get for this offseason or who the Raiders should focus on. Yeah. My final question about the O-line would probably be the draft, right? Because I'm kind of just a little bit turned off about the draft just in terms of what we saw this past season because they drafted and everyone was talking about, oh, what a great draft class. What a great draft class. Mm-hmm. And then we didn't even get to see a lot of them on the field. Yeah. And I was just like, okay, like, how are we going to assess these players? Now, I don't think that's something that, if Linc Kubiak signs, we're still waiting for that will happen, that they're going to have to play these young guys. But Q, if you're looking at the draft and there's all these positional needs and you talked about how on defense, you feel like the Raiders will focus on the draft with their defensive needs. And then also there's still that O-line though. Do you feel like they'll go out and draft a tackle?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you're going to see John Spytek every year address the offensive line in the draft. I really do. He's let it be known that he really does love his offensive linemen, and he wants to make sure that he has a stable of them. And I think that the Raiders should, right? I mean, the Raiders for years have had, top end talent as far as like, the first string, but depth, the twos, the threes, they don't have it. So I wouldn't have any problem if you have depth at the offensive line. Right, if you have a tackle that maybe you feel like you don't necessarily 100% need right now, but you're going to need them, right? There's really good organizations will let guys walk out of the building because they feel comfortable that they can slide another player in. So I do think that every year you're going to see John Spytek address the offensive line with a couple picks, guard, tackle, guard, however you want to put it, grab another center, whatever. I think that you're going to see him continue to do that, and that's the way that they should do it. Have an offensive line at some point that they can kind of be all on the same timelines, to have them all match up where they're all young guys and they can grow and gel together and create a force, and then if somebody happens to leave in free agency, you have another guy that fits exactly what they do. Like, I know nobody ever wants to give like the 49ers a lot of credit for what they do just because, I mean, who wants to talk about the 49ers. But the one thing I give them credit for is a lot of times they'll lose players, and then they'll have a guy that they call up off the practice squad. They'll have a guy that's sitting there on the bench waiting to get into the game, and they fit that mold because what they consistently do is they consistently draft guys for exactly what what they're looking for, or they'll sign guys off another team's practice squad that fit exactly what they do, and then they're able to coach them up. And so when a guy goes down, whether it's a running back, whether that's a wide receiver, whether that's offensive lineman, they just happen to be able to fill that void, step right into it without any sweat. There's if you heard a big ruckus here on Radio Row, Barry Sanders just sat down at the table next to me. So there you go.
Well, that would explain the big ruckus. Because Barry's there, but no, I agree with you in terms of the Niners, and I'm not trying to give props to the Niners, but what they do is they scout really well. Yep. And that's why for a long period of time, when their defense was dealing with all those injuries, their D-line was crazy stacked. Like their defense took a little bit of a hit this year. I think like they weren't as good as previous years. However, like they just scout really well and they always have a lot of depth. So that's something that hopefully the Raiders can get to at some point. Now, coming up on the other side, Raider Nation, Q and I will be answering some of your questions and comments. So please get them in the chat right now. We'll see you on the other side. Keep it locked here on the Locked On Network. You're watching or listening to the Raider Squad Show. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs helps put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Now, instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps you list your standing and it stands out to reach quality candidates a little bit faster. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. That's one word right now and support the show by saying you've heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Welcome back, Raider Nation. Remember, if you like the content, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. And once again, remember the Locked On Network is the #1 sports podcasting network. And we do appreciate your continued support. Every time you leave a comment, like a video, that helps the show grow. And we do appreciate you. Now it's time for questions and comments. And if you have any questions that you want to get in right now, Raider Nation, please let us know. So we're going to start off with Dominique, who's a good friend of the show, by the way. It says, Q, where's the beanie? Where's your beanie at? Because I know people were loving that on Locked On Raiders. Okay.
Boom. There it is. It was so cold in here last night. And every night it's so cold because I'm the last guy here. So I got to meet, and you'll appreciate this, I got to meet Carl Kanai.
Oh,
how
you
cool
did?
is that?
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
so
dope.
I interviewed Carl Kanai. I haven't even played the interview yet, but I got a chance to. And he's actually outfitting Coco Jones. She's going to sing for the Super Bowl, Lift Every Voice. And so he's outfitting her. He's got an NIL deal going, with a couple of athletes. And so he has a hell of a backstory. And, of course, when it comes to Carl Kanai, I mean, I grew up where, if I was wearing Carl Kanai, I was trying to impress somebody, right? I was, man, because you wear Carl Kanai, man, that means that you trying to get that woo, man. You trying to woo some female. So I told him, man, like, how cool is that to be here on Radio Row and sit down. And when they approached me and they said, hey, man, I don't know if you'd be interested, but I got Carl Kanai. I was like, the Carl Kanai? I said, yes. Oh, yeah, for sure. Now, my mom's not going to be happy because I was the one that I always stressed her out. Mom, you need to go get me these Carl Kanai. Boy, I ain't spending that kind of money. What's wrong with you? But, it was always, man, it was really cool. So to be able to meet an icon like that, knowing that, I wear Nikes all the time. Carl Kanai was back in the day, Jabot jeans and cross colors and all Z Cavaricci, like, boy, that was it back in the day. So yeah, really cool catching up with him. But yeah, I got the beanie right here because it's gonna get cold later. I promise you that.
No, and you know what they say? It's cold in it's cold in Frisco, but it's like not cold in East Bay. But I'll say
warmer
this
outside. It's warm outside. Like you can go outside and it's nice and warm. Like I've been walking everywhere. I come in here, I feel like I'm in an ice Man, my temperature drops like 10 degrees.
Yeah, and also in terms of Carl Kanai, those are legendary pieces that even now when I see people wear it, I'm like, yo, you're rocking Carl Kanai because those are still legendary pieces. But let's get to some Raider questions. Let's go to John Nishi, who 5914, also good friend of the show, says, question, what do you think about what happened to honoring a contract? Nowadays, players want to be traded. So in terms of players honoring their contracts that they signed and then wanting out, Q, what are your thoughts on that just in general?
Yeah. It's just a shift. It's a shift to where it's more of a players, driven league. And, we see it in the NBA all the time where it's 100% driven by the players. The players, have more say than the coaches do. But in the NFL, you can see it as well. When there's all of a sudden there's trouble in paradise, they want to bail and that contract doesn't mean anything. And they're going to, get picked up somewhere else, or they're going to be a part of, whatever the problem is. And then all of a sudden they become, some situation in the locker room and then they have to move them. It's wild. I mean, the contracts don't really mean anything these days. And it sucks, but you even see it in the college ranks. I mean, how many times do you see coaches sign contracts and long contracts and all of a sudden, boom, they're bought out and they're on their way somewhere else. And, you saw it in the college football playoffs with Lane Kiffin. I mean, this dude's got a team that could have had played for the national championship, right? They could have won a couple more games and got to the national championship game, and he's out of there. It's like, what? You know what I mean? Like, contracts really these days don't mean anything. Players, coaches, none of the above. It really doesn't matter. There's always a way out of them. And, so that's just kind of what it is.
That's just the time that we live in right now. If a player wants to get out, they get out of their contract. But I always say, like, if you don't want to play for the Raiders, you can get up out of here. That's what I say in terms of the Raiders. Let's get to some more questions. Let's go to DJ Raider AZ Squad. If Kubiak signs and he decides to bring on Derek Carr as his quarterback coach, will the Raiders owe compensation to New Orleans, or is that only if he's added as a player?
That's a good question that I don't know the answer to. I would be lying to you to if I said that I did. No, but I don't see that happening. I just don't. I don't think, and I know some people are like, well, why not? He's great. Like, I know that Derek wants to coach. I just don't think that the Raiders need that kind of distraction. I mean, think about when he was a player. Think about how the fan base was split. Some loved him, some hated him, right? Some didn't care, but I just don't think that you need that. And let Fernando Mendoza go out there and not play really well for a couple games. Then also you're going to talk about and hear people talking about, well, Derek needs to be the quarterback. Derek, it's just, I don't think that you need that distraction. I think that you need to just try to move forward, move on, and let Kubiak put together his staff. Now, with that being said, they have a really good relationship. So, maybe he does bring him on. Maybe he says that that's exactly what he wants. And if he does, then you support the coach and you see, you support his decisions, and you hope that Derek is a really good soldier when it comes to being a quarterback coach and ends up not being a distraction. But I feel like that this fan base is so split with Derek Carr. It's hard to let him just do anything without it having to be for another reason or you know what I mean? It's just, it never seems like it's that easy when it comes to Carr. And I hate that for him because I think he's a really good dude.
Yeah, and I was on that side that loved Derek Carr and appreciated everything he did. So if it was to happen, and he's been on his show with obviously his brother, and they've talked about this a little bit, and Derek has said, hey, Clint, if you want me, I'm here. So he's going to put that out there. And obviously Raider Nation still split on Derek Carr. Let's get to Warlock 67 question. Who from the Seattle coaching staff will follow Clint Kubiak? How many from the defensive side, Q? He brought people over from New Orleans to Seattle. So how likely do you think it is that he brings over some Seattle coaches to Las Vegas?
Very, very likely. I think the defensive coordinator has a really good chance if they don't go get Jim Schwartz. I think the defensive coordinator could easily come over. I think the quarterback coach is going to be the offensive line coach. I think the quarterback coach is going to be the offensive coordinator. That's what I should have said. But I think he's going to definitely come over. He's a guy that's followed Kubiak everywhere he's gone. There's a couple of different coordinators that I can absolutely see him bringing, because he did bring a handful of guys from New Orleans to Seattle. So I think you'll see at least a good 3 or 4 different coaches go from the Seahawks to the Raiders, including the offensive line coach. He easily could end up with the Raiders, and I think that'd be a good thing because again they know what Kubiak wants to run as far as his offense goes, and they're all on the same page. And so I would not be surprised at all to see, like I said, 3 or 4 good assistants leaving Seattle and coming with Clint Kubiak.
I think he has a short list, and in terms of who he wants to bring over, I don't think he's going to bring over everybody on his team, but I also think whoever the defensive coordinator is, he's going to have a say on who his staff is as well on the defensive side. But Raider Nation, that's all for today's show. Thank you so much for rocking out with us. We'll be back on Monday. Q, before we go, really quickly, who you got in the Super Bowl?
Seattle, and I got Rashid Shaheed to be the MVP.
Ooh,
Boom.
You've been pushing Rashid, and hopefully he has a good game. So you never know what the Raiders might do in the offseason. But Raider Nation, enjoy the Super Bowl. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, and we'll see you on Monday.
Yes, sir.